Hi there, this is Irina Barnett, and I love having conversations about life's defining moments and understanding human experiences. Moments That Define Us podcast is dedicated to healing the world one story, one defining moment at a time. So let's get into another conversation. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Moments That Define Us. I'm your host, Irina Barnett. Today on the podcast, I have an incredible woman. Her name is Lani Gonzales. She's an author, she's a public speaker, she's a clinical hypnotherapist. She has a freaking incredible story with a lot of heartbreak, triumph, failure. She talked about what happened when she did ayahuasca. She had quite a journey. She wrote a book about it, which you can find in the show notes. Actually, the name of her book is Rebirth of a Sage. She talks about her journey of ayahuasca. But also, I wanted to tell everybody that in this episode, we talk about some heavy topics. We talk about sexual abuse, rape, suicide. So if you're not up to listen to this episode, please skip and listen to the next one. Like I said, she has an incredible story. You know that I bring people on the podcast to share their story, to share all parts of their story, and we go as deep as people allow me to go. So Lani really opened up about a lot of heavy topics, but I did want to mention that we do talk about those topics. So like I said, if it's too heavy, I understand. So let's get into the conversation with Lani Gonzales. Lani Gonzales, Ms. Lani, welcome officially to Moments That Define Us podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and I'm so happy to share with your audience.
And I am so I don't even know what I'm feeling, like very happy and content to be talking with you because I've done my research on you and I've read a lot about you, and you've had quite a story, triumphs and failures and all of that, which we're going to talk about your defining moments and stuff. But, I like to start with something usually that I have in common with guests, right? And as I was reading, I was very happy to read that you're an immigrant. So I'm an immigrant myself. I came to the United States when I was 19, so about 22 years ago. But I read that you came when you were really young. You were about 2 years old. So what I wanted to start is tell me about your journey in the United States as an immigrant, and also why did your family first chose to come here?
Ooh, that's a big one. So I did immigrate to the United States when I was 2 years old. And I remember when I was a little kid and I was talking to my dad and I asked him a question. I said, "What did you want to be when you grew up?" And my dad said, "I wanted to be a doctor and I wanted to build a hospital for people who couldn't afford medical care." My dad is not a doctor. So I remember as a little kid going, "Well, wait, if you wanted to be a doctor when you grew up, why aren't you a doctor?" And he explained to me that in the Philippines, only rich people got to be doctors. And in fact, way back when my parents were younger and they lived in the Philippines and they worked there, they had a system where they would actually take your application, but then you would put a little picture of yourself with your application. And that was standard practice. And in the Philippines, um, there is something to do with the color of your skin, right? So we are one of those societies that the lighter your skin is, the more attractive that you are. And my dad jokingly said we had to move to America because he was too ugly to work in the Philippines. But aside from that joke, one of the things he said to me is in the Philippines, there were certain jobs that only rich people could have. And he was not one of those rich people. And one of the reasons that he moved to the United States was so that his children could be anything that they wanted to be. So, really, it started from my parents' dreams. And I do believe that we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And what I mean by that is, I do believe that I have created tremendous success for myself, but it's not because of simply my efforts. My efforts stand on the efforts that my parents had. So I think it's everyone has that, the American dream, right? So that's something that we're sold, that you can do anything and you can be successful, and America is a place for freedom. And despite what is happening in our country today, I personally still believe that the American dream is absolutely possible. So I'm incredibly blessed and I wouldn't take it any other way. I'm happy that I grew up in the United States the way that I did. I was an illegal immigrant for some point in my life, and I am currently a US citizen, but I grew up seeing my parents struggle. I remember we stayed with a relative at first, and then we eventually lived in a one-bedroom apartment. And I remember seeing those struggles. And my comfort foods, because it's what I ate as a child, was Vienna sausage and spam and sardines, because that's what I ate as a child growing up, because that's what we could really afford. And I just have these little bits and moments of memories that I saw, like my mom learning how to drive, because in the Philippines, a car was a luxury. People don't just drive cars. But in the United States, we don't have the same level of public transportation. So it is a necessity to be able to learn how to drive in a lot of areas in the United States. And I remember sitting on the couch and my mom and dad come storming in, and my mom is frustrated and my dad is frustrated, and they're yelling and they're crying and upset because apparently something went wrong or something happened learning to drive, which you've all been there. It can be a little scary. And as a child, I remember overhearing them saying, "But we have to. This is something that we need to do in order to make that dream survive." And I am blessed with that experience because I genuinely believe that anything and everything is possible because I've seen it done. My parents, they went from the Philippines, where my mother, she told me that she didn't have a toothbrush, they would chew on twigs. And they didn't have electricity or anything like that. So she knew it was time to go to school based on the sun, and she saw other kids walking past. And I remember my dad telling me a story where he is number 10 out of 11 kids. And they would go through the dumpster of the YMCA, and they would get the old towels that had holes that the YMCA threw away. And that's what they would sleep on. So from that to where they are now, where they are entrepreneurs in the United States, they have multiple properties in addition to their home. And my parents say that they have more money than, they could really spend in their lifetime. So they spend that money helping people in the Philippines. And being able to see that journey, I believe that absolutely anything is possible. Not only do I believe it, I know it to be true because I've seen it with my own eyes. So um, I believe that the United States is still a place where the American dream can thrive despite what's happening. And the United States was built on immigrants. It is a shame to see what is happening today, that we shun immigrants and we treat them like they're less than human. We treat them like threats instead of people, when we fail to remember that this is a nation built on the backs of immigrants,
Right.
myself and my family included. So I share my story proudly because it is one of many that have built this nation.
Oh my goodness, Lani, what a story. What a story. And I think only immigrants can understand other immigrants. And I mean, like, you and I are first generation here, right? Like, I mean, or what would be the first, I guess my kids would be first generation, but when we came here young, I came here without my parents, but what is so many interesting things you said that I wanted to touch on. First, you said that in Philippines, the lighter skin you are, the more attractive, the more opportunities you have. I think that goes everywhere. The same for United States. Racism exists everywhere and anywhere. Colorism exists anywhere and everywhere. So I thank you for sharing that, but also why your parents decide to come here. And I think also so many immigrants share, like, especially the one who came with their parents at the young age, saying, my parents came here because they wanted to have better life for their children. And you are that example, one of many thousands and millions. Like you said, this country is built on immigrants. And how hard
we work. You know what I mean? How hard, especially that like older generation, they come and they know you have to work to make something of yourself, you know? And there's so many stories like this. And I also appreciate you touching on what's happening in the countries in this country today, because yeah, what we see, you know, children being taken away from their parents, United States citizens are being targeted by ICE, are being killed, are being put in detention without any sort of due process. And I do believe that no matter what platform we have, and I'm not talking about, you know, that social media, whatever, you have church, you have school, you have what, we have to speak up because our voices are so powerful. And that's why I think they're trying to push us down, shut us down, because they know how powerful we are as a community when we come collectively together. So I do appreciate you saying not being afraid, because a lot of people are afraid to stand up and speak up. So I do appreciate you saying something about this.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I will say this, there is a balance to this where, yes, it is absolutely true for all countries that they can't just have complete open borders and let every single person in because it would drain their own economy. That is true for every single country. However, you mentioned the word already, and I'm a lawyer and I love the word due process. That is one of the things that built this nation. We left an old empire because that old empire was run by a king who could do whatever he wished. And we said, we are going to be different. We're going to have due process. We are going to listen to people. One of the reasons our country was born because we were taxed without representation. And now we've built a nation, and it was birthed on that premise of exactly what you said. Due process is yes, we have a problem in our country, a problem that a lot of countries face, but we will do it in a way that is dignified, that upholds justice and freedom. And what we're seeing today is not that. So it's important to really acknowledge our roots, not just as individuals, but as a country and a collective as a whole. Remember where we came from and remember what it is all about is we left a giant empire with a king with taxation without representation. The same thing happened there, where the king tried to enforce different taxes and different rules. And when the colonists had issues, they responded with force and soldiers. And that is what got us to birth a new nation. So we need to remember what our roots are. And the saying goes, we need to remember and learn from history, otherwise, it repeats itself. So, do we really want to go back to what we left, where we're being dictated by someone who thinks they know better for the purpose of profit when we forget humanity? And even if you look at the Constitution, justice,
Yeah.
freedom for all.
Unfortunately, right now, that is not really a thing. Freedom and justice, it seems to that that's not present. But I am hopeful, like throughout, because like you're right, throughout looking throughout history, you see people fought because with that we have to be hopeful, you know, we have to be hopeful and we have to be actionable. So again, what a great like words that you said. We have to remember where we come from, who we whose shoulders we stand on. You and I are here because of other immigrants who came here, who opened
Yeah.
the door, you know. So it's important to know. Okay, Lani, I wanted to get a little bit more into your story and some defining moments because you do have quite a few.
The good, the bad, the otherwise, the adventures and misadventures. So definitely have a few. I would say in my defining moments earlier in life, right? We're all shaped between the ages of 0 and 7. That's where we get our core structure about what we believe about ourselves, the world, and everything in it. And for myself, there was a lot of trauma and abuse. And my parents, they did work a lot, as immigrants do, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. And I fortunately, one of the consequences of that was they weren't always present. So, that being said, I had experienced rape, I'd experienced abuse by the time that I was 4 years old. And it happened during daycare. And my parents just were not present enough to be able to protect me from those things. And when I was 8 years old, we decided to return to the Philippines for a trip. My parents had a little bit more financial stability, and we took a trip there. And I didn't always have birthday parties growing up as a kid because we were poor. And it was a little confusing because as a kid, I would see other people's birthdays celebrated in this really big way. Even worse, I had a cousin whose birthday was near my birthday, and I saw that she had these parties and these celebrations with all these people, and I didn't. And as children, we internalize everything, including those types of experiences. And finally, on my seventh, turning eight birthday, um, I got to have a birthday party in the Philippines because the money goes a long way there, and a
Yes.
dollar goes a long way. And during that birthday party, my grandfather decided to end his life. And as a child, we all make conclusions about the world around us, the rules that we're going to internalize in order to keep us safe and understand the world. And my brain, subconscious, went, I know why this happened. I didn't deserve a birthday party. I didn't deserve nice things. I didn't deserve to be celebrated. I probably have to earn that. And that was in my subconscious dialogue, similar to how a lot of people, when you get divorced, a lot of children, they internalize, oh, mom and dad got divorced because of me. And as adults, that's completely not the case. But children, we have these egos and we try to relate ourselves to the environment around us and we make these conclusions, even if they're not accurate. And one of my conclusions is, I'm not worthy, but I'm going to try my best to be worthy. And my family is incredibly religious. And one of the tenets in the Bible that I experienced and witnessed growing up was, oh, God punishes those who are bad and rewards those who are good. So, because I was raped, I was abused, I experienced all these difficult things, I made the conclusion I must be bad then. All of these happened because I was bad. And I remember as a child, I only prayed for one thing. I prayed for the pain to stop. And when that prayer wasn't answered, I made the conclusion that God didn't hear my prayers, so I must not be worthy. So that whole thing internalized into what I became. And when I say what I became is I wanted so badly to feel good enough that I would do whatever it took. And society gives us a blueprint. Hey, you want to be successful, you want to be respected, you want to be liked, here's what you do. So I achieved success. I finished college early. I became a lawyer at 23 years old. I was a partner shortly after that. I had the things that people told me I was supposed to want. You got a house, you got it. You have a title, you have a great job, you have a nice office, got it. But I felt incredibly hollow, and even other ways of trying to achieve. And went, okay, if this isn't enough, do I do a marathon? Do I do a triathlon? Do I do martial arts? And I was constantly aiming for more and more achievements. And it's this never ending cycle of not enough. And it took a lot of self reflection and a lot of healing in order to really get off of that treadmill that never really ends, that never enough cycle. And part of it, yes, was counseling. I knew very early on that I was not okay. So as soon as I left home and went to college, I started going to counseling because a lot of colleges have resources for their students to seek counseling for free or at no cost. So,
Lani, I'm sorry to stop you,
yeah,
but I wanted to go back a little bit. So your childhood trauma, and yeah, you talk openly about it. Unfortunately, this is the case for so many people, boys and girls, right? A lot of people experience childhood trauma. I wonder, when that happened to you at such a young age, and you were talking about how, at your birthday party later on, how you thought, okay, I must deserve this and all of that. But I wonder, when that happened to you, did you tell anybody? Did you tell your parents? And you didn't say, do you have any siblings?
I do. And I grew up in a culture where you don't air your dirty laundry. And I
Mm.
remember the first time I mentioned that I even went to counseling, an aunt told me, why would you air your dirty laundry to a stranger? So there's a lot of secrecy and a lot of showing face and everything being okay on the outside, and you just deal with it on the inside. And in terms of um, my grandfather and him deciding to end his life, I do remember that I attempted to tell a relative who was not at that birthday party, who was on the other side of my family. And she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I missed your birthday party. How was it?" And my response was, "Everybody cried." And my mom very quickly interrupted because it was her father. And she said, "Oh, everybody cried because we're going back to America and they're going to miss us so much." And then she brings me into a separate room, and she has never spoken to me in this way and has never been this forceful. But she said, "You are never to speak about this again. You will never speak about this." And she said it with such force that it actually made me afraid of her and afraid to speak. And after that experience, I had PTSD as a child. I didn't know it. As an adult, I recognize it now. I had trouble speaking. There were certain things that happened. Um, my grandfather, one of the things that he did, because he made several attempts throughout the day of that birthday party, he laid down on the highway and was run over by a truck. And after that experience, I remember that if a truck or a car that was loud would pass by, I felt it in my entire body. And I just had no explanation. And moving forward, and I was 8 years old, and this happened until about the age of 30 or so, I think even a little bit later. Every year on my birthday, my legs would get really itchy because when I was a kid, I wore an itchy dress because, little girls have all that frill and it was itchy. And my hair was done in a way that was super tight and it hurt my head as a kid. So every year on my birthday, those were some of the things, even if I mentally thought I was good, I'd get itchy on my legs and I'd start to feel the tightness on my like hair and my scalp. And I would just completely devolve into a person that I was not. Well, to clarify, I evolved into a version that most people did not recognize, including myself, to the point that I always self-isolated on my birthday. And I've dated people in the past who've seen me on my birthday, and I was met with either shame or people trying to fix me, which is not something you do with people with chronic PTSD, treat them as they're broken. And in terms of rape, I was raped at such a young age, I didn't know what rape was because, again, I came from a culture where we don't talk about those things. You certainly do not tell a 4-year-old about what sex is. So when that happened to me, I just knew something really bad happened. I just knew that whatever happened was not okay. And the reason I realized that I had been raped is when I was in high school and I had friends who started having sex and doing things with their partners and sharing it with me. I went, wait a minute, that happened to me. And it was almost re traumatizing realizing in high school, wait a minute, I think I've been raped. And I did not share that with anybody. And even in high school, I was raped by someone. And the reason I said nothing was my culture did not say I love you. It was not a common thing. My family didn't say I love you, but this guy did. And it felt nice to hear it. So I took it. And fast forward when I was an adult, and I remember also dating somebody and sharing this part of my past. And he goes, "Why didn't you tell anybody?" And the reason that he asked me was because in the news at that time, there were the trials where a woman was accusing someone who was going to be a judge of engaging in sexual assault. And it had come decades later, these accusations. And a lot of people go, "Oh, that must not be true. If a woman is coming forward 10 and 20 years later making an accusation, she has an agenda. She just wants attention. She doesn't like this man and she's just being vindictive. And maybe she's just a lover who's been scorned." So, yeah, if a woman comes forward 10 or 20 years later about sexual assault, she must be lying. And someone asked me the same question. "Why didn't you say anything? Why did it take you over 10 years to tell someone that you had been raped?" The answer is simple: shame. And I was so buried in my own shame that I couldn't say it because I thought that if I admitted that someone had raped me, it meant something bad about me. Because again, my upbringing was I was Christian, or at least that's how I was raised. The reason bad things happen to people is because God must be punishing them, is what the church would say to me. So, by me confessing that I had been raped multiple times, abused multiple times, it felt like I was confessing that something was wrong with me, that I had done something wrong. And the other part of it was, who would even believe me? I've
Right.
complained about smaller things in the past and you didn't
Mhm.
believe me. You didn't even bat an eye. So why would you believe me now? And a lot of women, a lot of people who have experienced abuse, their first response is shame. I'm going to talk about that a little bit towards women because shame is an emotion that we know how to hold really well. We are
Oh yeah.
conditioned to hold shame. And I work with a lot of women. A lot of women don't know how to hold anger. I hear a lot of times with women, oh, I'm not really an angry person, or I don't get angry. Or some people go, I don't feel comfortable being angry, or I'm angry, but I don't want to feel angry. So I'm going to rush to forgiveness. And anger is incredibly important because it is the emotion of injustice. And if we don't honor that feeling of anger, we don't speak for that emotion and raise the flag of we have been treated unjustly. But an emotion that we teach all women to hold really easily is shame. Look at yourself and see all the reasons that you are flawed and broken and incomplete. So if something happens to you, that subconscious inheritance that we have as women is it must be your fault. So
Yeah. And society does it so well. All the society, all the marketing, all anything that are ever sold to women. You're not skinny enough. You're not either you're not thin enough or you're not fat enough or you're not this or you're not that. It's all that, but you explained it in such understanding way about shame. And I hope the listeners who either went through some sort of abuse like that, or people who think, well, why didn't you ask something, will hear this and like, okay, there is a reason behind it. So maybe I shouldn't ask, why didn't you say something?
yeah.
Um, but you've mentioned a lot of different things, a lot of trauma. And you said when you went to college, or you said, I always knew that something was not right. So when you went to college, you started counseling. And then you mentioned your achievement. Yeah, you're a lawyer, you are a partner. I don't know if you currently still practice law. Do you still practice law right now?
I do not practice law, so I have an active law license. I would love to be able to help people with that license. And the way I think of it is I've been cultivating this sword for so long. And just because right now that's not something I want to use doesn't mean that you throw it away. And
Yeah.
give me a good enough fight, I'm willing to raise my sword. So
There you go.
it exists.
But you've done so much. And you talk, I read somewhere where you said that, because I wanted to read, because I really like how you put it. The childhood trauma taught me to chase achievement as proof of my worth, evidence that I wasn't broken. And you said the higher I climb, the more unfulfilled I feel. So, with the counseling in college, what were the next step that you were starting to realize, hey, I'm achieving all of this, but I'm still empty and unfulfilled inside, and something needs to change. So, what
Yeah.
what other things were you doing to kind of find your way out of that emptiness?
Oh, I did all the things. So for the people who are listening and they still feel stuck, there is a tool for you. You just have to figure out which one works best for you. And I tried all of the things. And I will say this as a comfort to those listening. I wake up every day with joy and excitement for the life that I get to live. But that has not been true for the most of my life. And I fought suicidal thoughts since I was about 10 years old. I had suicidal ideations about once a month with my period. Instead of getting PMS, I got suicidal thoughts. And I self harmed. I had an eating disorder. So when I say I was not okay, I knew that I was not okay. And I sought help very early, but that still was not enough. I went to counseling, every counselor under the sun, all the different methods that you can go to. I tried and it helped.
Mhm.
Counseling is a beautiful first step because it's a way to be witnessed, to put words to your pain, and to be able to have someone hold space for that is incredibly important. Counseling can give you tools and resources. And for me personally, it did give me tools. It gave me tools to logically understand what happened, it gave me tools to help me cope and self soothe. But what I found was there's a difference between coping with your pain and learning to actually put it down and walk away from it. And for me, counseling was a start, but it wasn't really what I needed to make the bigger shifts. I read all the self help books, I did meditation, which was incredibly healing for me. But um, I tried hypnotherapy once just because a friend did it and I was curious and it's like, why not? And I remember the funny thing was the reason that I went to hypnotherapy because I was sad about a boy I don't even know who it is at this point. I can't remember who it was, but I
Not
was
important.
not even important. And I was devastated though. And I went because I had a broken heart. But when you dive into the subconscious mind with hypnotherapy, it shows you what you need to see. Not necessarily what you want to see, but what you need to see. And what I worked through and what I saw in that hypnotherapy session helped me so that I never had suicidal thoughts again. So I went from having them once a month to never having them ever again. Which is one of the reasons that I was inspired to become a clinical hypnotherapist to help people in that same way. And another big part of my journey is psychedelics and doing ayahuasca. And that for me was incredibly life changing. It helped me not just with my mental health, but my physical health as well. I spent my 20s in and out of the hospital. I was on all sorts of medications, and they didn't know what was quite wrong with me. But I had meningitis 3 times and I had sepsis twice, and they couldn't figure out why. And when I did ayahuasca, what I realized is the body is infinitely wise and it will heal itself under ideal circumstances. Burying grief, shame, trauma, anger, pain in your body, that is not ideal circumstances. And I had so much of that contained within my body that my body was trying to process and hold for me that didn't have the chance to heal me and make me grow and make me thrive. And when I was able to resolve it, purge it, and actually leave it there, I was off of medications overnight and I've never been hospitalized since. And I was taking many, many medications. So it helped me in terms of my health. It helped me even reconcile my relationship with my higher power. Um, if you asked me before that if I believed in God, my response to you would be, I don't know and I don't care. It's completely irrelevant to me. And I did have in a different experience. I had a near death experience in the Arctic. Had hypothermia camping by myself, trying to chase the northern lights. And I received information out of nowhere about where we go when we die and the amount of choices that we have, and how powerful we really are. And after that experience, someone recommended a book to me, and it's called Conversations with God. And I went, oh, I don't want to read that. And they're like, no, 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 it's not about God. It's not religious. It's fine. And I read it, and it's about a guy who claims to have conversations with God. And I read this book and I went, oh my God, all this information is what I hallucinated when I was in the Arctic having hypothermia. So there must be something to this. And I love to travel. I've traveled to the world, over 40 countries solo. And at first, I was just traveling and I didn't really know why. But then eventually, I realized that I was searching for meaning, understanding, truth. I was searching for a bigger thing, something bigger than myself. And eventually that led me to Colombia to do ayahuasca. And during that ceremony, I realized, oh, I was looking for God. And I don't believe in God in the traditional sense of some dude in the sky who grants wishes like a genie based on our intentions and our heart. I certainly don't believe that. But when I did ayahuasca, one of my issues was, if there is a God, it's not one I want to know, because why would he make me suffer the way I did? I was a child. There was no justification for that. And when I did ayahuasca, I got so much clarity and so much understanding. And I realized that every single prayer that I'd made, even the ones that were still on my heart that I could not speak out loud, they were answered just in the ways that I didn't see or hear. But from that bigger perspective, I realized that every single prayer had been answered and I had always been guided. And I found tremendous comfort in that, comfort with my journey and realizing that I had built a life based on shame and a lack of worthiness. And one of the first things that happened with ayahuasca, so ayahuasca is a psychedelic tea that's brewed in the Amazon, by the way, by shamans. And they've done this for centuries. And um, people say, "Oh, I'm afraid to do it because I don't want to throw up because it does make you purge. You might have diarrhea, you might throw up." And a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm afraid to do that." And I'm like, "Nope, that's not the thing you should be afraid of. The thing you should be afraid of is that it'll show you who you are and it'll show you the truth." Most people go, "Oh, that's easy. That's fine. I can take it." And they're like, "Can you? Can you really?" Because most people cannot. And for me, that was the hardest part, because one of the things that I was told is, "Hey, you know your entire life. You built it because you didn't like yourself." And some part of me understood that, but to really see it for all that it was, I went, "Oh my God, everything that I have built was because I did not believe I was worthy." And after moving through the trauma and being able to heal a lot of things, what I saw was what I was asked, they said, "Do you want to see what your life would look like if you built from a place of love?" I said, "Yeah, let's look at that." And I saw what my life could be if I actually built from a place of love. And after that experience, I just started writing, and I didn't know what would come of it. I had no intention of writing a book, but that a book eventually became published, which is Rebirth of a Sage, which talks about my ayahuasca journey and a lot of the trauma that was resolved. From that, I was invited to a podcast to speak about my book. And from that, I was invited to speak at an event. And that was my first paid speaking event, which opened the door to being a public speaker and speaking around the country about trauma, about subconscious programming, about a lot of these different things that need a bigger stage. And after doing ayahuasca, I went back to school and I became a clinical hypnotherapist. And I eventually left my job as an attorney, because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And that's the thing you should really be scared of, is if you see the truth in that big of a way, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, and people, yeah, I heard, like, I was so curious to talk to you about your ayahuasca experience because I've learned it through a documentary of a stand-up comedian who did it. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Just kind of because she filmed the whole thing. And maybe what it's Chelsea Handler
Mhm.
the stand-up comedian, and she filmed the whole thing. And so it was really interesting. Um, and like you, I was like throwing up and having that. That's not this. That's that's whatever you can clean up, but having like seen all of that, right? That's I think the scariest part. I heard a story of a guy who did it, and he unfortunately committed suicide because he also had a lot of trauma. And what his wife said, he's like, when he came back from ayahuasca, he was never the same. So
Wow.
because you talk about how it helped you open up and you were able to see, if I'm like putting the word correctly, like different life for yourself and see the trauma and look at yourself differently. But I don't know if it's if for some people when they see the truth, it scares them so much that they can no longer go on.
Yeah, so I actually facilitate ayahuasca retreats, and that process is 1 month of preparation. So even before we do ayahuasca in South America, you're doing that work of unpacking those things and being open in the best way that we can so we receive as much as we can. And after the retreat that's run by shamans who've been doing this for 30, 40 plus years, um, there's a 3 month integration process. What does that mean? A lot of people think that the ayahuasca retreat is the pinnacle of the experience. It is not. That is the start of your experience, and there's an integration process. So I work with people for 3 months after the ayahuasca ceremony to start unpacking. And the truth is that integration process is a lifelong journey. And a lot of people think that what ayahuasca is, oh, I'm going to take it, I'm going to be enlightened, and I'm just going to have this brand new life. That is not true. Ayahuasca is a catalyst. It is not a crutch for us to use in order to enter the next steps of our life. And it needs to be used with the proper intention. It also needs to be used with the proper guidance. And the reality is, what happens is, yes, you're open, and a lot of these things come to the surface. The next question is, what are you going to do with it? And a lot of times in ceremony, sure, you purge and you release and you clarify. And this is actually part of my book, after the ayahuasca experience, because after I came back from ayahuasca, even though I received all this information and clarity and connection with my higher power, I came home and I had my very first panic attack. And for those of you who've never had a panic attack, it feels like you're dying and it feels like you're having a heart attack. And I thought I was actually dying. And I knew that ayahuasca was already out of my system. So I'm like, no, I'm not, there's nothing going on there. But I actually went to the hospital because I was so afraid because I had never had a panic attack. And when I went to the hospital, they tried to medicate me and they tried to give me all sorts of medications. And it was in the middle of like the early morning. So they gave me a script and said, hey, there's a pharmacy that's open 24 hours. Just go fill it there. And I remember driving in my car and there's no one on the streets because it's super late. And I'm just crying and I'm hysterical. And I can hear the voice of the shaman in my head that said, do not bury, stop burying. So I pulled over to the side of the road and I just started screaming because I was so mad. There was still stuff to be purged and stuff to be let out. And from there, my screaming turned into words, which turned into a poem, which is in my book. But what I started screaming is, I will not carry the weight of your sins. And that goes back to what we talked about with shame and all of the things that happened. I was carrying the weight of other people's sins. Other people raped me, but yet here I am carrying the baggage from it. Other people harmed me. Other people critiqued my body. And here I am trying to purge and be thin. And what came out of me was no more. I will not carry the weight of your sins. That is not my pain to hold. That is yours. And that happened after the retreat. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to be perfect and life is going to be good. It is just the start. So having a good integration program after. And for myself, I didn't have an integration program, and I was looking for different resources all around the world, actually, for people to try to help and support me who understood my journey. And I said, there's no way that this doesn't exist, which is why I created it. So that's why I do my retreats in the way that I do is, yes, we go to South America, you go to the retreat, but then we have integration for 3 months afterwards. So yes, you should be afraid. It is a very big life-changing journey if you allow it. They say the medicine calls to you and speaks to you. So if you're called, that's definitely something to consider. And yes, there's always fear. And my question always is there something worth more to you than that fear? And for me, there was. I was tired of running and I was tired of hiding, and that was worth more to me than any amount of fear that I had. But understanding that your journey does not end after that. You're more open, you're more raw. So there are things that come up. I've seen people who afterwards, kind of like myself, would have panic attacks more regularly, but that's because they now see the wound. You've buried it for so long. Ayahuasca helps you unbury it, but now there's the wound. It's bleeding. What are you going to do about it? And you have to be willing to do something about it. So, um, yeah, it is very common that a lot of people get enlightened and wisdom and healing, but it's also very common, as in all healing journeys, that it comes with difficult moments, the dark souls of the night. That's a necessary part of a lot of people's journey that we shouldn't shy away from.
Yeah, I think, I think change comes with you can't, change doesn't come easy. You have to change some things about yourself. You have to let go of some things. You have to look at whatever it is that's inside of you really truthfully, right? That's the
Mhm.
only way we change and get on the other side. Thank you so much for sharing your ayahuasca story. And I was looking through, just doing the research. I saw your book, and I'm really curious. I'm gonna read your book, to see, like, in depth what your experience was. I want to ask you a question about traveling. You said you've traveled to over 40 countries. I was going to say 400 countries, 440 countries. So, my question for you is, what did you find through traveling? Like, what did you find about people in all these different countries when it comes to love, happiness, community, gathering, all of that?
Yeah.
What was some interesting takeaways for you from your traveling?
Yeah, so that's actually what my second book is about. It's called Metanoia, and that goes into a lot of my world travels. And what I realized is there are some things that you cannot learn in school and you cannot learn from a book. And when I traveled, one of my goals is I make friends with a local and I'm invited to their home for a meal. I don't force it, but that's kind of one of my goals is to learn about them and to really learn about their world. And what I realize is they are some of the biggest life lessons that I have learned from people. And they're ordinary people that you might just walk past. They don't look special, they're just random people. But if you get the time to actually know them, they'll tell you a thing or two that'll really change your life. So, book number two, Metanoia, is about all of my world travels, not all, but many of them, and the people that I met along the way. I think of book number two as my love letter to them, is saying, I remember you, and I'm so grateful for how I have been changed by you. And this is one little example. I went to Guatemala and it was one of my first international trips. My excuse is I traveled for work and I had prior work trips, so I had a very large suitcase, but I had a massive suitcase with me. And I was staying at a place that was at the top of a mountain. And the guy was like, "Hey, I'm going to help you carry this up, but you got to bring this down." And I'm like, "Okay." And as he's lugging it up the mountain, he goes, "Oh my God, like you have enough clothes in here for an entire family in Guatemala." And I laughed and he laughed. And eventually the luggage got up there. And as I was going through Guatemala, I did meet a family and I was welcome into their home. And they showed me around. And I did, in fact, have more clothes in my suitcase than an entire Guatemalan family. And the initial feeling was a little bit of shame and embarrassment. They didn't know that, but me recognizing I did, in fact, carry more clothes in here than a whole family probably owned. But what I saw when I was there was they had a level of happiness that I did not at the time. And they took such comfort and joy in each other, and they were more than content in the life that they had, even if they didn't have a lot. And that gave me a lot of perspective about the level of baggage, not just clothes, but actual stuff and baggage in my life that I had that I really looked at and said, do I actually need this? What is this for? And I remember on my way home from Guatemala, because I did have to bring that suitcase back, I just threw it down the mountain because I was like, you know what? I don't value it that much anymore. And also, I can't carry it down. So, just these experiences of seeing how people live. Most recently, I did a women's retreat in Tulum. And there's a man who brought us to the cenotes and through the jungle. And he says, I'm the last Mayan, and I'm writing a book called The Last Mayan. And as we're hiking through the jungle, he shared these stories with me. And he said to me at one point in the trip, he said many well helpful things, but one thing he noted is he's like, you see this tree? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, yeah, the sap, it'll make you itchy. And he goes, now you see this other tree that was right next to you. He goes, this makes it soothe. It's the cure. And he says, they always grow together. If you find this tree, you're going to find this other tree nearby. And he says, you always just have to find what cures you. And he walks on. And I just love this notion that sure, we all have these hardships and trials that are put in our path, but the solution and the cure is always there. And we just have to be
Mm.
open to be able to see that it exists. And I love being able to see that. So I'm going to say it's a combination of things. Does travel change you? It can if you allow it. Uh, my eyes were open and willing and eager to learn. I was hungry to learn from other people. I was thirsty for that type of information, so I received it. So travel has been a very important part of how I've learned about myself and how I've learned about what it means to live. But the truth is, a lot of people don't experience that because they're just there for the highlights. They're just there for the pictures, and they're just there for all the touristy sites, which there's nothing wrong with. But recognizing, kind of like we said at the beginning, the wealth of a nation is its people. And if we travel to places without really honoring the people that exist there, we miss a lot about what we can truly learn from a country.
Yeah, I so agree with you when you said there are some things you just can't learn at school or from a book. It
Mhm.
really is when you get out from your little village, from your little town, from your city, from your country, you go meet other people. It's incredible, and I really love that story about the two trees because I feel like oftentimes in life we get hurt, but the cure is right next to it. But are we open enough to see it and to receive it? Thank you for sharing. You have a very, as I said at the beginning, you have a very beautiful and calming energy about you, and just being. I always tell this to people because I'm very lucky for anybody who comes on the podcast. They open up. They come with open heart. And as I mentioned to you, it was like, if there's something you don't feel comfortable, but I am very honored that people come and they opening up about even the hardest things. But then through hearing each other's story, we see it's not just me. Because again, like I told about the childhood trauma, about all these different things, not feeling good enough, especially for women. There's so many that can relate. And
Mhm.
to see what you how you were open to doing more, to learning more, to changing, to accepting the good and the bad, and moving forward in such a beautiful way. You have such an inspiring story, Lenny.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching Moments That Define Us podcast on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe so you know when the next episode is coming up. But not only subscribe, share with other people so we can build community around this podcast, so we can share more stories, more defining moments. Because as I always said, sharing a story has the power to heal. So subscribe and share, and let's build community. Thank you. So to finish up, if you already mentioned the two books that you wrote, and I'm gonna link them up once I release the episode. But what and you also mentioned some retreats that you do. So tell people where they can find you, follow you, yeah, all the things about you.
Yeah, so my website is LaniGonzales.com. So if you just Google my name, you'll find my website, you'll find all the social media. That's the easiest way to find me. I am a clinical hypnotherapist, so I do help people unpack those really heavy things. And you can find information about complimentary consultations on my website. Also, there are ebooks and some resources, meditations for free on my website as well, just to get you started. So everything is online, just LaniGonzales.com, and that's a great first start.
Again, Lani, I really appreciate you coming today and chatting with me about just a few of your defining moments.
Thank you so much.